Hello everyone. Today I'm not doing a vlog, but I'm going to do a video to talk about my admissions process to get into the Oxford MBA. It wasn't an easy road for me. I didn't use admissions consultants, and it took me a very long time to get to the application stage. The GMAT was the hardest part for me. So I'm here to share a bit of the tips and things I learned throughout the process. So it might help any of you thinking about the Oxford MBA who is also struggling, because the whole process is such a mystery and I want to just help demystify it a little bit. I'm going to refer to the MBA application requirements straight off of the current Oxford MBA website. So I'll walk you through each element, and I might be looking at my laptop down here just to refer to the notes. So let's get started with number 1, full academic transcript. I graduated from my undergraduate degree in 2013 from UC Davis, which is considered a top 50 school, I suppose, of the US, maybe a tier 2 school if you are concerned with where your school stands in the US News ranking. But that said, it's not entirely important what school you went to. Of course, it helps if you went to a big name school, but that's not the only thing that's important. I had classmates who went to schools that were small liberal arts colleges, and they got in just fine. The other thing I'll mention is that I had a pretty low GPA, a 2.96 out of 4, and that worried me a lot because it's way below average, which is probably a 3.0 or 3.5. I did mention in my application that I took a bunch of hard science classes. I took a whole year of chemistry, a whole year of biology, and a whole year of organic chemistry because I was thinking I'd do environmental toxicology in my undergrad, but changed halfway through. So all of those chemistry courses I took didn't really mean anything, but in the end it did drop my GPA a lot. So the admissions team does consider the difficulty of your courses, and they might weigh your GPA differently depending on what you took. So don't think it's the end of the world if your GPA is lower than some of your peers. They might have studied something entirely different, and it might even add some diversity to the class if you studied something kind of weird and random. For me, I did graduate with environmental science. It could have been an interesting piece of my profile that differentiated me from someone else. Let's move on to number 2, 1-page CV containing professional experience. I am from the US and I've worked exclusively in the Bay Area in California. I first worked at an environmental consulting firm for 6 months, but that's just a glorified way of saying I did a lot of reporting for our clients, didn't really do the type of management consulting you might think of. Then I went to work for a nonprofit medical group and did a pivot to data analytics. I taught myself a lot of the data analytics I know now, and I think having that science background did help with that. I had a classmate who said that is an interesting part of your career where you did a complete switch from your undergraduate skills to something completely different in your professional life. So I do think that's important to highlight in your entire application. I continued my career in a tech company in San Francisco, also doing data analytics, but had more project management experience. So I was able to speak to a more management-focused degree such as the MBA. I also did a few years of volunteering in San Francisco for a low-income high school, and SBS is always looking for ways that you contribute outside of your work. Even remembering the smallest things you did as sort of volunteer experience or an extracurricular could add to your story. And for me, it did add to my story because I wanted to move into a social impact career. So that was important for me to talk about because I basically wanted to do more of that in my professional career. SBS does tend to accept a more mature group of students. I think the average age is 29, but I know a lot of people worry about being too old for the MBA, myself included when I was looking at US programs, but please don't let that discourage you. I had classmates who were in their mid or late 30s and even into their early 40s, and no one really pays attention to your age when you're in the classroom. They're really interested in your 10 plus years of experience. Everyone is looking to get to know you, what you've done with your life. It's even more interesting if you've done more with your life because you're older. So the professors don't look at your age, your classmates won't really look at your age. You might feel a little self-conscious, but don't feel like that's going to keep you away from doing an MBA. Number 3 is the GMAT or GRE Score report. This part took the longest for me in my whole application process. I hate to admit it, but it really did just take me that long to get to the score I needed. I don't think I'm a great standardized test taker. I'm like bang average when it came to the SAT and other tests, but what I do think I had was I can work harder than other people. So I probably studied about 13 months in total for the GMAT/GRE. And I did start with the GMAT. I spent about 5 or 6 months on it. I even took a GMAT class with amazing instructors. I can't have more praise for them, so I will link them in the description box below because they do have online courses. So even if you're not living in San Francisco where I took it, they might actually have an online class for you. Anyway, I took the GMAT multiple times. I could only get as high as a 640. My aim was a 700. I was thinking because my GPA was a bit lower that I should compensate with a higher GMAT score. Couldn't get higher than a 640 in my official score reports, and a friend told me to consider the GRE. The quant part is easier. Reading comp is about the same. It's a little longer, so it's not a walk in the park, but test it out. So I switched to the GRE, and it wasn't a walk in the park, but I was able to score a Quant 161, Verbal 163, which was substantially higher than the Oxford MBA average. I couldn't even get close to the GMAT average at the Oxford MBA. I did take the final exam in May 2020, so I took it remotely at home when COVID hit and closed all the test centers. And I don't know if that affected me, but the home exam I felt a little more comfortable taking it at home. So not sure if that's an option for you now, but I would consider the take-home version if it's still offered. Since I am from the US, I didn't have to do the English test requirement, so I do apologize that I don't have much insight there. You'll have to refer to your own country requirements. Next requirement is the references. My first reference was a manager I had 2 years ago from when I made my application. So I asked for a reference from her. My second reference was someone who was an informal supervisor to me after my previous manager had left. So I know a lot of people ask, what if I can't use this person? Can I use this person? And the answer I can give you is as long as they played some sort of supervisory role in your work for a substantial period of time, I'd say 5 months at least, then yes, you can probably use them as a reference. The admissions team just needs to see someone who was able to oversee your work and make a judgment about it. So even though they're not your official manager, as long as they played that role, that should be fine. I think the convention to give notice for a ref is about 2 months. My case was weird because by the time I finished the exam, I had about 4 or 3 weeks left to make the final round, which was round 5. COVID extended the application period for a lot of schools. I thought I had completely missed the application round, so I had told my references probably 6 months prior that I wanted their reference, but thought I would move my whole application process to the next year. Turns out I was able to squeeze in my application 4 weeks beforehand, and they were gracious enough to do a letter of recommendation about 3 weeks before I needed it. Not the best situation, but I had a good relationship with my references, so I was able to ask them to pull that favor, but yeah, I wish I didn't have to do it that way. Next requirement is the supporting statement. I was pretty rushed with the essays and had about 2 weeks to do them, but since I had about a year to think about why I wanted to do the MBA, I think I was able to articulate my thoughts pretty quickly and get them on paper pretty quickly. So as long as you're clear about why you want to do the MBA and how your journey led you to this point to think about doing the MBA, that's what is the most important thing to include. I just had a couple of friends look over my essays and revise them, but I didn't have to make too many major revisions and was able to submit as is. I know a lot of people ask for an admissions consultant and pay like $2,000 to review that, which if you think you need, then that is perfectly fine. But yeah, I think the key is to just know why you're doing an MBA. You don't need to create a whole dramatic story about, well, I don't know what it is, but I think I've heard stories of admissions consultants creating those kind of dramatic stories to get the admissions team to pay attention. But I don't think that's always the best way to go. It's best to be straightforward and clear, and yeah, just drill in the purpose of why the MBA is important for you in your next step in your career. The next requirement is the online assessment. I don't remember much of these, but I know that a few other applications, like the Tuck application, did video questions, so I just prepared the ones that I saw on GMAT forum or the other MBA forums. They're pretty standard. The questions usually cover all the topics that you need to cover, so follow those and you'll be fine. I do remember the last question was a random one. I think I got a pretty easy one, and I know a classmate of mine had a more abstract one. Mine was, if you had a food that reminded you of home, what would it be? Or a smell that reminded you of home, what would it be? And then my answer was my parents' chicken soup, because when I went home and they were making it, the whole house would smell like chicken soup. My classmate had a question that asked, how would you describe the color red to a blind person? And she gave I thought, a pretty clever answer, which was, I would describe it as the color of hot or heat. Now I'll jump into the whole timeline of my application process, because I think I might have been a little confusing earlier in the video. I started studying for the GRE in May 2019, then took 2 GMATs between July and September 2019, and made the switch to the GRE in December 2019. I took 3 GMATs between December 2019 and May 2020, and I finally took the score in May 2020. I had no idea that the admissions teams of all the MBAs had extended their deadline to about the end of May until I finished my GRE. So I scrambled to submit applications that were due on the week of May 29th or the first week of June. I applied to Tuck, Yale, and Oxford. I got rejected from Yale, waitlisted by Tuck, and accepted to Oxford. So by the time I received the Oxford acceptance, I was still on the Tuck waitlist and finally pulled out of the waitlist. But that was my whole applications journey, I suppose. It was way longer than what I planned. I think most people are able to get their score that they want for the GMAT or GRE in about 6 months, sometimes less. But I took the scenic route, and I think I'm the exception in this, but I took about a whole year. But I have no regrets, and I'm happy to share the sort of learnings I got from each step, and I hope that was helpful for anyone who is thinking about applying to the Oxford MBA. As always, comment down below if you want to hear anything else, and good luck!